Hello. Hi, guys. How's everyone doing today in what is a very rainy day in the East Coast? I think it's been like a few rainy days. But I just wanted to do again another class of our installment for, healing from chronic diseases, chronic illnesses, and things like that. So I had put a question in my group the other day about what is the number one thing that can help you heal from chronic illnesses, whether it's adrenal fatigue, chronic fatigue. What is the number one thing that you can do to heal from adrenal fatigue, chronic illnesses, things like that? And I got a variety of answers, some really, really good answers that I got. But unfortunately, I think unanimously from the literature, from studies, all the practitioners now are finding, and I unfortunately did not get this answer, but all the practitioners are finding that to heal adrenal fatigue, chronic illnesses, inflammatory issues, the number one thing to do is balancing your blood sugar. That is the number one thing to do. And so I am going to do a quick session, a quick educational class on it today, because it is one of the most important things that you can do and that I have done, that I have led many, many patients through how to heal their chronic illness by balancing their blood sugar. So let me explain this a little bit. When you have or chronic illness, you already have an imbalance in your dysfunction, imbalance, whatever you want to call it, in the adrenals. And so when you have blood sugar that is constantly dysregulated, and it could be dysregulated by increased cortisol, which is like stress situations, which is why people with adrenal fatigue will always tell you that I cannot handle even the slightest amount of stress. Why is that? That's because they have imbalance in their blood sugar, which can then not be maintained by the adrenals. Or they say to me, when I eat a meal, I feel very much brain fog. I feel dysregulated after a big meal, after carbohydrates. I even had a patient ask me recently who had adrenal fatigue that I feel really terrible with juice cleanses, and she was an adrenal fatigue patient. And so same thing, when you have increased stress, you're going to have really increased cortisol, which causes a dysregulation in your sugar, in your glucose, blood glucose. When you have increased insulin, because when you're constantly eating carbs, you're constantly eating these meals that have high glucose, high sugar, and your body has to then produce more insulin to help combat and break down all that sugar. Then again, you're going to feel brain fog, lousy. And then if you have increased inflammation, if you have a diet that is full of processed foods, rancid oils, things like that, then you're really going to feel that increased inflammation. And so that's going to really cause an imbalance in your blood sugar level. So it's very, very important to keep your blood sugar balanced to decrease the stress on the adrenals. So when you have increased stress on the adrenals, so for instance, if you're driving and you get into a car accident, or if you get upset at someone and you get into an argument with them, what that does is right away that increases your cortisol. And your body realizes that this is a stress situation. We really need to bring glucose into the bloodstream to address this tiger or stress situation or fight or flight situation. We need to address that. So it starts bringing more sugar into your glucose into your bloodstream, and that in turn causes an imbalance in your blood glucose level. And so increased stress is a big factor in dysregulating your blood glucose levels. And what that causes is increased blood sugar. Then it causes, mood swings. It causes the danger situation. It even gives you a headache when you have so much cortisol, whether it's produced suddenly because of, getting into a car accident, let's say, or if it's long term, like if you have, issues with your spouse or your kids or whatever, then you're going to have these headaches and things like that because of the increased cortisol. And all of it came from the imbalance in the blood glucose level. When you have dysregulated adrenals, they secrete too much cortisol. So in someone who is an average person, doesn't have issues with their adrenals will stress a situation, a fight or flight situation like I just talked about, and their body will produce a blip of cortisol. But then very quickly they realize, like, okay, the situation is done, or I didn't get in an accident, or I'm okay after I had a fight with my spouse or my child or whatever. Then it goes back down, and they don't have this dysregulated high amounts of glucose dumped into their blood. For someone who has adrenal fatigue, that cycle doesn't keep, it's a vicious cycle. It doesn't happen where it's produced and stops. And so the adrenals are very dysregulated, where they continue producing the stress hormone, the cortisol, in turn causing high blood glucose levels and things like that. And it just stays in that vicious loop. It doesn't get out of it. The other way that is very, very important to decrease your blood sugar level is with your diet. Whatever it is, whether it's high blood glucose and low blood sugar, I mean, whatever it is, you really need to keep it regulated. So, for instance, if you haven't eaten or you ate a meal, I'll take both examples. If you haven't eaten this is why they recommend for patients with adrenal fatigue to eat every couple of hours. But if you haven't eaten a meal in 4 or 5 hours and your blood sugar is starting to drop, then again, the body stresses that as a stress situation, tiger situation, fight or flight situation. And because of that, with that blood sugar dropping, your body is like, okay, hello, more cortisol. Your adrenals start producing more cortisol to tell the liver to start dumping stored glycogen from the liver into the bloodstream because the sugar is dropping. So in doing so, the adrenals are producing cortisol, and that cortisol stays up regulated, doesn't come down. And so then you feel lousy. The other situation is that if you've eaten too many carbs and your body senses that the blood glucose is really going up, and your body says, uh-oh, this is too much blood glucose into the system, the adrenals start producing cortisol. So either way, when with diet, if you're not managing and maintaining a steady blood glucose level, whether your blood glucose level spikes or blood glucose level goes down, the adrenals get into hyperactive mode. And that is what causes that constant imbalance for the adrenals, whether your blood sugar is going up, going down, your adrenals don't know which way to act. And so they have to continue producing cortisol, which is what they do. And in turn, over time, the adrenals are like, we're done. We're done with this cycle, up and down constantly, whether it's stress, whether it's diet, whether it's lack of eating, hypoglycemia, hyperglycemia. The adrenals are like, we're done with this. And so we cannot produce any more cortisol. So in order to answer my question that I asked the other day, in order to balance, to heal from adrenal fatigue, you have to balance your blood sugar levels. And there's more and more practitioners now coming out with their data, their studies to really show, and I'm living proof of it myself, but even my clients, this has worked like a charm. You have to keep your blood glucose levels steady. And so the couple of things that I work on with my clients is increasing protein intake, especially the first meal of the day is, breakfast is high protein, high fat, and then slow release carbs. You do need carbs as an adrenal fatigue patient. Do not fear carbs. You actually do need carbs, but you don't need carbs like sugar and high fructose corn syrup and those things that will completely spike your sugar. You actually need just a steady amount of glucose in your blood. And that is done through eating high protein, through high fats. It really keeps your blood sugar level steady. The other reason that I really incorporate high protein, high fat, and slow release carbs with my clients is because then it keeps their blood sugar level steady for a longer period of time. If you have a high carb meal, it goes up and then it spikes down, and within 2 hours you feel lousy and your cortisol's produced and you've got a headache and you've got brain fog and your body says, hello, time to eat again. Whereas if you've eaten a protein and fats and high fiber meal, your blood sugar stays very steady until the next meal. So that is also very, very critical to maintain your blood sugar levels. So balancing your blood sugar, whether it's through diet, whether it's through decreasing your stress levels, any of those things, keeping your blood sugar levels steady at all times gives the adrenals a break, gives it a rest for the adrenals to say, okay, we don't have to be constantly in this hyper alert mode, producing all the cortisol and making us sicker and sicker. And so keep your blood sugar balanced at all times throughout the day before you go to bed. I mean, maintain a steady blood sugar level, blood glucose level, and you will see that you will really start healing from adrenal fatigue, chronic fatigue, any of these inflammatory issues. I hope that helps. Thanks.